Your parents instructed us to wait for your signature to release the inheritance to your brother, the banker's voice said over the phone. I stood there frozen, my phone pressed against my ear, every word echoing like a slow explosion inside my head. I hadn't spoken to my parents in almost a year, not since they told me the inheritance they'd promised me since childhood was better used elsewhere. Now they needed me. My name is Rhea Caldwell. I'm 34 years old, and I've learned that blood may run thick, but betrayal runs deeper. I grew up believing in fairness, in promises, in the kind of unconditional love only parents are supposed to offer. But what I received was something else entirely. I was the eldest of two, raised in a modest but comfortable home in the outskirts of Richmond, Virginia. My brother, Nolan, was 5 years younger, always the golden boy. While I studied hard, graduated with honors, and built my own graphic design firm from scratch, Nolan bounced from one failed venture to another, always propped up by our parents' blind support. They said he was still finding his path. I was already on mine, but apparently, that made me less interesting. The topic of inheritance had come up over the years, usually in passing, my mother casually mentioning how the house would be split equally, the family's savings, my father's land. We've planned everything carefully, they'd say. You'll be taken care of, both of you. I believed them. I shouldn't have. Things began to unravel after my father had a health scare. He had a mild stroke, nothing devastating, but it shook them enough to start preparing all legal documents. I wasn't asked to be involved. Nolan was, when I asked about it, my mother said, "You're too busy with your business. Nolan's here. He understands the situation better." Something didn't sit right, but I let it go. I trusted them. They were my parents. After all, 3 months later, during a casual visit home, I overheard a conversation I was never meant to hear. "She won't contest it," my dad said. "Rhea's always been independent. She doesn't need it like you do." My mother nodded. "We're doing this for the family. You'll keep everything afloat. She has her company, this is just paperwork." I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, mouth dry. My name. My future. My trust, signed away without a single conversation. I left that night without saying goodbye. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I needed time to process it all, to decide whether I was ready to burn bridges or just build new ones elsewhere. Over the next several months, I distanced myself. Calls went unanswered. Messages ignored. I focused on my business, growing it to a team of 15, landing our first international client. I didn't need their money, but that wasn't the point then. The phone call came at IT was a woman from Fidelity Regional Bank. Her voice was polite but formal. "Ms. Caldwell, I'm calling in regard to the family trust established by Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell. A transfer of assets is pending, but the legal structure requires dual signatory approval. Since you are listed as co-executor, we need your signature to release the full funds to your brother Nolan." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her correctly. Despite everything, despite rewriting the will and shifting all assets to Nolan, some technical detail in the trust structure had remained unchanged. They thought they could take everything and leave me in the shadows, but now, they needed me to make it official. I didn't feel anger. Not immediately. What I felt was power. Quiet, heavy power. I called my parents the next day. "Oh. Rhea," my mother said. "We weren't expecting to hear from you." "I heard from the bank," I said evenly. There was a pause. "Oh. That." She launched into a well-rehearsed justification. That Nolan needed the house. That I didn't understand. That I'd always been self-sufficient. I let her finish. Then I asked, "Why didn't you just talk to me?" "I hired an estate attorney. We reviewed everything. What he found was damning. They left you nothing," he said. "Except the signature they now need." I smiled, "Yes. And I intend to make that count." Through my attorney, we informed the bank that I would not release the funds until a formal mediation occurred. Suddenly, Nolan and my parents were scrambling. They tried guilt. Then pressure. Then sweet-talking, but I had made up my mind they wouldn't get a single cent without facing me first. At mediation, I sat across from them, calm, steady. My attorney laid out the terms, a fair redistribution, or no signature. They protested. They begged, but the truth was out, they had planned to erase me quietly. I had returned loudly. In the end, they gave in $50-50, $1.2 million in cash. Half the land. Full ownership of my grandmother's antique property, the only piece I ever truly wanted. I walked out without saying a word. The sun felt warmer. My lungs felt freer. I didn't feel victorious. I felt unburdened. A month later, I received a letter from my mother. We never thought you'd turn on us like this. I folded it and placed it in a drawer. They hadn't thought I'd turn on them, because they forgot I could stand for myself. I used the money to expand my business. I restored my grandmother's house. I began hosting art retreats for young women trying to build something of their own, offering them what I never had, a place to be believed in. Sometimes I see them in town, they don't meet my eyes. That's fine. I'm not the one who turned my back on family, they were, but every time our paths cross, I see the same look, recognition tainted with regret. Maybe it's because they realize they underestimated me. Maybe it's because they know I've done more with my half than Nolan ever managed with his whole. Nolan tried to call once. No voicemail. Just a missed call and a name I haven't seen light up my screen in years. I didn't call back. I didn't need to hear another excuse. A mutual friend later told me he tried to sell the house our parents gave him, but he'd racked up so much debt that most of the money went to pay off loans. He's renting now, living smaller than he ever imagined, still searching for that big break. Funny, isn't it? He got everything. And yet, somehow, he still feels empty-handed. Restoring my grandmother's property became a full-time passion project. The old farmhouse had been crumbling for years, its floorboards groaning like a body in pain. But I poured my heart into it, stripped the walls, preserved the original wood, painted it in deep, rich colors she would have loved. It became more than a house. It became a refuge. Each room I renovated felt like reclaiming another piece of myself they tried to take, and when it was finished, I hosted the first creative retreat there, a weekend of watercolor, journaling, and long conversations under the stars. They came from different places, young women with stories like mine. Overlooked. Underestimated. Told they weren't enough, or that they were too much. And as I stood in the garden with them, listening to their laughter, I realized something. Family isn't always the people who share your blood. Sometimes, it's the people who see your worth without needing a signature to prove it. There were times I wanted to write to my parents again. Not with bitterness. Just truth. To say, I didn't need the money. I needed the acknowledgement. I needed you to say I mattered, but you gave all that to someone else. I never sent it. Some things don't need to be said out loud, some things are better left in the silence where they belong. It happened almost a year to the day from that first call. The same bank. A different voice. Ms. Caldwell, I'm calling to let you know that the joint account set up through the trust has matured. You now have full discretion over the remaining funds since your co-executor has defaulted on their responsibilities. I blinked. Defaulted? Nolan failed to file required tax disclosures. You're now the sole executor per Clause 17b. Another unexpected twist, more control, more responsibility, and one more chance to do what they never thought I would. I redirected the remaining funds, what was left after Nolan's mismanagement and taxes, into a new foundation, the Marigold Fund. Named after the flowers in my grandmother's garden, it provides grants to women from estranged or unsupportive families trying to start businesses, study, or rebuild from ground zero. No red tape. No endless forms. Just trust, and a chance, the very things I never got when I needed them. People think legacy is about what you leave behind. The house. The land. The money, but I've learned it's really about what you build in others, the way your story becomes a ladder for someone else to climb. Nolan got the house. I got the truth. He inherited land. I inherited clarity, and in the end, what I've created means more than anything they tried to take from me. The Marigold Fund now supports 5 women-led startups, everything from a tiny bakery in Baltimore to a tech repair business in Dallas run by a single mom who used to sleep in her car. I never tell the applicants where the money came from. I don't need them to know about the betrayal that made this possible. I just want them to feel seen, supported, and strong. That's the legacy I care about now. One rainy morning, I was prepping the farmhouse kitchen for an upcoming workshop, when I heard tires crunching on the gravel driveway. I looked out the window and saw a familiar car. My mother stepped out, umbrella in hand. I didn't open the door right away. I stood still, my hand resting on the knob, heart drumming against my ribs. When I finally let her in, the silence between us was louder than any shouting match we could have had. She looked around. "It's beautiful," she whispered, taking in the restored floors, the wildflowers on the windowsill, the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls from the oven. I waited. "I came to say I was wrong," she said finally. I should have felt something, vindication, relief, even gratitude. But all I felt was tired. "Why now?" I asked. She looked down. "Because everything fell apart. Nolan's not doing well. Your father's had another stroke." And I realized I was proud of the wrong child. That cut deep. Not because I needed her pride, but because it confirmed what I'd always known. She had made a choice. And she was only revisiting it now because the outcome wasn't what she expected. "I didn't need to be the favorite," I said softly. "I just needed to be respected." She nodded, lips trembling. "I understand now. I'm sorry." I didn't hug her. I didn't cry. I didn't forgive her on the spot. Some apologies come too late to fix what they broke. After she left, I sat on the porch and watched the rain wash over the wildflower beds. I thought about how far I'd come. There were no shortcuts. No sudden strokes of luck. Just quiet, determined steps forward, even when it hurt, and that's what this place stood for now. Not revenge. Not bitterness. But resilience. A reminder that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing yourself, even when no one else does. The Marigold Fund started getting letters. One was from a girl in Oregon. "I didn't think anyone would believe in me," she wrote. "But now I have a storefront with my name on it. I named my daughter Marigold." Another came from a woman who fled an abusive home and used the grant to start a freelance photography business. "You saved my life," she wrote. "I hope you know that." Each letter healed something in me that my family had broken. It was like I had built my own constellation from pieces of a sky they once darkened. One afternoon, I stood at the county clerk's office to file the final paperwork for the land transfer. The original deed had my father's name. Then it passed to Nolan. Now, it bore mine. The clerk smiled. "Feels good, doesn't it?" I nodded. Not because I needed the land, but because I needed the space to grow. The farmhouse, the workshops, the fund, they weren't part of the plan my parents had for me. They were what I made when their plan left me out, and now, no one could take them away. Sometimes I still think about that first phone call from the bank. How calm the voice was. How routine it all seemed. Just another form, just another signature, but to me, it was the moment everything changed. They tried to hand my life to someone else. But the pen was in my hand all along. I didn't just sign the paper, I rewrote the ending. And that ending? It wasn't about revenge or reclaiming what was rightfully mine. It was about choosing how the story would be remembered, not for what they took from me, but for what I did with what was left. Them wide days are slower now, but they're full. In the mornings, I walk the edge of the wildflower fields with a mug of coffee in hand. The fog curls around the trees like soft arms. Sometimes deer come out, unbothered by my presence. The land feels alive again. Like it finally trusts me. Afternoons are spent mentoring women who remind me of myself, quietly capable, cautiously brave, deeply underestimated. We sit around the kitchen table, sharing ideas, setbacks, wins. One of them, Alina, cried the first time she got a check from the Marigold Fund. "No one's ever invested in me before," she whispered. I looked her in the eye and said, "Start by investing in yourself. The rest will follow." Eventually. I did write a letter to my parents. Not out of obligation, but because I needed to clear the space inside me where their words once echoed. I didn't write to accuse them. I didn't even write to forgive them, I just told the truth, that I had found peace in places they never looked, that I had created something they didn't believe I was capable of, and that while I wouldn't erase what happened, I had chosen to grow around it. I mailed the letter and didn't wait for a reply. Nolan finally reached out, not through a lawyer, not through guilt, but through a handwritten note that he admitted things hadn't gone as he thought. That he'd lost most of the inheritance through poor decisions and worse advice. That he was struggling, but he didn't ask for help. Instead, he thanked me not for the money, not for anything specific, but for not letting it make me cruel. I see now that what they gave me was never truly mine. I just wish I'd learned it sooner. I didn't reply immediately. But I held onto the letter. Because in its folds, there was something I never thought I'd get from him: respect. Almost 2 years to the day since the first call, the bank rang again. A new advisor. A different tone. Ms. Caldwell, we'd like to highlight your trust structure for an annual recognition program. It's unusual how you've reinvested every cent. Unusual, funny how what they once called naive or emotional now had a different name, visionary. I declined the spotlight. I didn't do this for attention, but I smiled as I hung up, because finally, my choices were speaking louder than their assumptions. That spring, the marigolds bloomed brighter than ever before. I hosted a 3-day retreat called A Route to Rise. 20 women showed up from all over the country. Some had never left their hometowns. Some had escaped toxic families. Some just wanted to remember who they were before the world told them who to be. We sat around bonfires. We cried. We danced. Barefoot in the grass, and on the final morning, I walked them through the garden and said they tried to bury me in silence. But I grew, and now, so will you. It took me a long time to realize this: my real inheritance was never in a will. Never locked in a vault. Never handed over by a parent who didn't believe in me. My real inheritance was resilience. It was the strength to rebuild when others expected me to break. It was the clarity to see what was worth keeping and what I needed to release. It was the power to use pain as compost and grow something beautiful from it. So yes, my parents gave my inheritance to my sibling. Yes, I was betrayed. Overlooked. Written off like a footnote in someone else's story, but then the bank called me to release the funds, and I did. I released the funds, I released the anger, I released the story they wrote for me, and I chose to write my own. A story not of loss, but of growth, not of revenge, but of rise, not of family by blood, but family by choice. That's the story I live in now, and if you're still reading, maybe it's a story you needed to hear, too.